Hello and welcome to day 2 of this event where we are marking 50 years of OECD consumer policy. Yesterday, we had people watching from 102 countries around the world. We had people from Suriname, the Bahamas, Barbados, Bhutan, Myanmar, Mongolia. I'm not going to go through them all, but you can see we had an amazing geographical spread. So it's our chance to do a bit of armchair traveling while none of us can get on planes, but it's really wonderful to think that you're all out there watching. So stay with us because we've got some good sessions for you today. In a moment, we're going to be talking about the changing product safety landscape, something that is changing beyond measure. And we're also going to talk about consumers in the green economy. So we hope that you are going to be ready to ask questions. And you can do that if you weren't with us yesterday. You'll see that there is a Q&A function on the screen, so you can do it. It's very straightforward. If you want to tweet and talk about it outside, it's hashtag OECD Consumer. Just to remind you actually that there are interpreters working with us today. Hello to the interpreters and thank you very much. We've got interpretation between French and English, and so some of our speakers later on will be speaking in French, but if you prefer to follow in French or English, you have the choice with the buttons at the bottom of the screen. We have with us again today Josh, our impressive illustrator. Are you there, Josh? Ready to wizard our words into images? So we're very, I mean, you did a great job yesterday. Thank you so much, because it was so fast moving and Josh is trying to keep up with making these wonderful images and illustrations to really bring it all to life. So that was fantastic. So before we get on to our first panel, we're delighted to have with us as our first keynote speaker, Satvinder Singh, who is the Deputy Secretary General for the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, joining us from Jakarta. Before taking on this role, I know that you were the Assistant CEO of Trade, Connectivity and Business Services at Enterprise Singapore. We're delighted that you're with us and we're really interested to hear your perspective on what we're talking about today, the mobile and hyper-connected consumer.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chair. Very good morning to Mr. Matthew, the chair of the OECD Working Group on Consumer Product Safety, and also good morning to Stevenson, Mr. Stevenson, the chair of the OECD Committee on Consumer Policy. Distinguished speakers, ladies and gentlemen, a very, very good morning, and allow me to begin my remarks by first expressing my sincere appreciation to the OECD for organizing this wonderful conference. I'm so glad and congratulations that you have such a comprehensive participation, such an inclusive participation from all over the world. Congratulations. It's truly a pleasure for me to join you here today and to be the opening day program, which I understand focuses on very important key issues. The first being the changing consumer product safety landscape, and second, consumers in the green economy. Let me start by sharing how the COVID-19 pandemic has not only kind of caused shortages and price increases for food and health products and other essential commodities, but it also has led to a kind of a rise in abuse and also unfair trade practices, I think not only in ASEAN, but I'm sure all around the world. And this kind of risk and abuse is also kind of getting more apparent in the online consumer activities where, as you all know, many millions of new consumers have entered onto the online activity, more so in the post-pandemic period. It is thus apparent that protecting and empowering consumer rights, both offline and online, becomes extremely crucial to build a fair, safe, and a resilient, sustainable economies through consumer protection. So to me, consumer protection, we all know, has been long recognized as an integral part, even where we live in the ASEAN. It's a very important part of ASEAN economic and social integration process. In fact, for the almost last 15 years, there's an ASEAN Committee on Consumer Protection, we call it the ACCP, which has worked to ensure that consumer protection takes center stage in regional policy-making agenda. In fact, the efforts of the ACCP has been aimed at ensuring that consumer protection measures, including laws, regulations, and policies, have been placed in all of the 10 member states of the ASEAN. In fact, there's a very strong desire for consumer access to information to be enhanced, within the communities here. There's also a focus on developing mechanisms for consumer readdress and ensuring product recalls are in place. Therefore, there are efforts on improving and strengthening the capabilities of consumer protection authorities. And among the notable recent achievements, it includes the development and the dissemination of what we call the Code of Good Online Business Practices to businesses in the ASEAN. And there's also the simultaneous launch of almost 3 regional campaigns, namely on misleading advertisement, on consumer readdress, and also on safety on online shopping. All that took place in 2020. All of these examples of initiatives, they're all in line with the strategic approaches adopted under the ASEAN Economic Blueprint. This is like the big plan that ASEAN uses to guide our development and integration. In fact, there are more detailed initiatives under this blueprint. In fact, there's a very specific initiative. It's called the ASEAN Strategic Action Plan on Consumer Protection, very specific. And more recently, in the midterm review of the blueprint, we have also identified some new deliverables under the new plan, which includes, I'm sure all of you will be glad to know, a guideline, an ASEAN guideline on consumer protection in e-commerce, and also an ASEAN guideline on product safety regulations. Consumer product safety, as all of you know, is really a major concern for all market economies like ourselves in the ASEAN. In fact, defective products impose various direct and indirect costs on consumers and, of course, the broader community and the merchants. In fact, over the years, product safety regulation has increased. Global changes in markets and technologies, combined with heightened consumer expectation on product safety, not only have generated demand for governments to undertake regulatory reforms, but also for businesses to place safe products on the market and also to be accountable for unsafe products through the issuance of corrective actions. ASEAN as a region has recognized this as a priority area for our international collaboration as trade in goods accelerates across the region and across our trading partners. The influx of goods heightens risk to traders and consumers, especially unsafe products being traded. And this is only to rise to we all know is going to be becoming even more serious an issue as more and more e-commerce takes place. And of course, with the rising of the strong competitiveness to compete at all costs, giving rise to, of course, more potentially unsafe practices and products. The ASEAN high-level principles for consumers, it calls for a protection of consumers from harmful goods and services. It stipulates that ensuring access to safe goods and services are the collective effort of governments, business, and consumers. Because governments alone cannot ensure that. We need the collective effort of everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, the official recall or the banned products in ASEAN have regularly been updated and exchanged since all the way back in 2011. In fact, the ASEAN Product Recalls Portal now contains, I'm told, more than 300 product recalls and efforts being made to enhance the uploading of voluntary and mandatory product recalls in real time. More recently, as recent as July 2019, the ASEAN Regional Recalls Portal had also integrated with the OECD Global Portal and the product recalls, definitely allowing for a wider dissemination of information on product recalls worldwide. We are so glad for that. The OECD recommendation on consumer product safety adopted in July 2020, it comprises of key elements that are at the core of consumer product safety frameworks and definitely is integral, and it serves as a basis for the subsequent development, hopefully, of our own ASEAN guidelines on product safety regulations. It is important that emerging consumer product safety issues be discussed to ensure that the safety of products are ensured throughout their lifetime, and the initiatives are carried out by authorities and businesses to protect consumers from unsafe products online, particularly with the introduction of Internet of Things and the artificial intelligence embedded in consumer products. It makes it all more complex. It is widely recognized that consumer confidence in safety of products, it truly supports the sustainability of market development. Ladies and gentlemen, ensuring sustainable consumption and production patterns are aligned with the goal 12 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the Principle 5 of the ASEAN High-Level Principles on Consumer Protection. The ASEAN High-Level Principle, it stipulates that informed consumers have an essential role to play in promoting consumption that is environmentally, economically, and socially sustainable through their choices of producers. As consumers become definitely more sophisticated over time, their interests will shift to ethical and environment considerations related to production and the supply of consumer goods and services. In fact, based on the results of the 2020 Healthy and Sustainable Living Survey conducted by Global Scan, consumers worldwide are willing to change their behavior to become healthier, to become more sustainable, and of course, provided guidance as well as all of these, solutions are easy and affordable. It has to be that. At the same time, it's also important to recognize definitely the essential role of businesses in producing goods that use minimum natural resources and toxic materials that would otherwise jeopardize the needs of our future generations and sustainability goals. The project on promotion of sustainable consumption in ASEAN, again, that was implemented since 2019. It had an objective of raising awareness on sustainable consumption among consumer protection authorities and relevant stakeholders. In fact, this was funded by the Japan ASEAN Integration Fund. The project supported the convening of the ASEAN Regional Forum on Promotion of Sustainable Consumption, which was held in August last year, and is currently supporting the development of ASEAN Sustainable Consumption Guidance Toolkit, which has definitely been identified as one of the key deliverables for us for 2021 to promote a better understanding of behavioral, communications, regulatory, as well as economic tool needed for sustainable consumption. We believe that governments, businesses, and consumers, all of us play a very important role in promoting product safety and sustainable consumption. In fact, a very strengthened partnership among all the stakeholders is necessary, and it is this spirit that we intend to emulate in today's sessions. I think with that, love to thank you all for our intervention from the ASEAN Secretariat, and I truly wish all of you a very fruitful discussion on a very important topic.
Thank you so much. So interesting to hear what's happening in the ASEAN region, and interesting that you talk about the ASEAN Product Safety Portal linking in with the OECD Global Recalls Portal, because the OECD is working with countries and regions that are really outside its membership, and I think is very keen to do that with other countries. So if anyone's watching who's also interested, perhaps we can put a link into the comments section so that you know who to contact if you are interested. But thank you so much indeed for telling us what is happening in the ASEAN region. Thank you. So we're now going to move on to our first panel, where we are talking about the changing consumer product safety landscape. We heard yesterday, we know it. There's new technologies, new business models, particularly online marketplaces. Lots and lots of new challenges for product safety. So where does that leave product safety laws? Are they fit for purpose? All these sort of things that we need to talk about in this session. Before I introduce the panel, we are delighted that we have with us Bob Adler, who is acting chairman of the United States Consumer Product Safety Commission, joining us from Washington, DC. Bob, so you're going to give us a bit of a sense of how you think international cooperation when it comes to product safety can make a difference, I think.
Yeah, I hope so. And hello to everyone watching. And Kathy, thank you for that. And I do want to stress the importance of international cooperation. It's delightful to be part of that. I also want to thank OECD for the invitation to share a few thoughts with you during this important international event. I've been involved with product safety and consumer protection for most of my professional career, which is well over 50 years right now. So let me begin with a few short personal observations about how things have evolved in product safety. During the past few decades, we've witnessed a remarkable and necessary growth in international cooperation. And let me stress that we are so delighted to be part of the international cooperation. I'm pleased to say that my agency, the Consumer Product Safety Commission, has been part of this growth. And we have an international team that has kept our agency productively engaged with a long list of bilateral and multilateral partners. And the OECD's Committee on Consumer Policy and its Working Party on Consumer Product Safety have helped define and promote the essential practices that can keep consumers everywhere safer. The recently revised OECD recommendation on consumer product safety demonstrates this point perfectly. In fact, to the extent that OECD's promotion of the very best practices in product safety results in fewer unsafe products being made and introduced into markets anywhere, and I think they are, consumers in jurisdictions everywhere around the world are better protected. This brings me to the theme of the session, the changing product safety landscape. As I noted, this changing landscape promises to be one whose terrain will be a challenge to all of us. For example, with connected products, devices inherently global in nature, we now have the potential for more rapid notification to consumers about things that can keep them safe. At the same time, we have the potential for a safe product to suddenly become hazardous after it's in a consumer's possession and without that consumer's knowledge. And amazing new products enabled by artificial intelligence can keep consumers safer by controlling a product's function and influencing consumer behavior to lower the risk of injury. But it may also raise new questions about where we draw the line as to responsibility for safety when a product is evolving over time. And there's COVID-19, this tragic, incredibly destructive pandemic. There's no denying, however, that humanity's shared experience coming through COVID, and at my agency in particular, has taught us a few things. Some of them good, some of them not so good. The technology boom in virtual participation, which we were mentioning before the program started, has lowered barriers to inclusion. And that helps NGOs in particular to be able to attend a standards development meeting with little or no cost. That's a great step forward. The COVID-fueled explosion in online shopping and internet sales has made it easier for consumers to get products they want without a trip to the store. But that same trend has also made it harder for regulatory agencies like mine to enforce safety requirements as international direct-to-consumer sales from online platforms bypass the traditional checkpoints that we relied on in the past. It's no secret that laws written in the 1970s are not adequate today, and that bringing regulatory tools up to date will be an ongoing task. I've looked at the agenda, and I know these and other important examples will be covered by this session, so I'm going to conclude my remarks with a thought that's been attributed to Nelson Mandela. He said, "Safety and security don't just happen, they are the result of collective consensus and public investment." These proceedings today share in that spirit, and I wish everyone participating all the best as the discussions unfold. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Bob. And yes, as you say, so many advantages and so many challenges of the new world out there. So we will try and get into some of those in our discussions. But as you say, the laws are not adequate. Thank you very much. So we are now moving to a speaker from China. We're delighted that we're going to hear from Mr. Yunsong Wang, who is the Deputy Director General of the Bureau of Quality Development, State Administration for Market Regulation in the People's Republic of China. So delighted to hear what the view from China is on the new challenges of keeping consumers safe.
Dear guests, good afternoon. I'm Wang Yunsong, the Deputy Director General of Bureau of Quality Development of State Administration for Market Regulation of China. It's my honor to make a speech here. As we all know, consumption is the ultimate purpose and the driving force of protection. It has become a decisive factor for high-speed economic growth. According to OECD public information, consumption accounts for more than 60% of GDP of OECD countries. In China, consumption has been the main driver of economic growth for many years. China's annual total retail sales of consumer goods accounted RMB 39.2 trillion in 2020. Despite the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, the share of final consumption expectation in GDP still contributed 54.3%, which is the highest in recent years. With a population of 1.4 billion and more than 400 billion of which are middle-income groups, China is one of the world's largest consumer markets with a heavy consumption potential. As there is still much more room to release consumption potential for China and in the world economic development. According to OECD forecast in December 2020, China's contribution to global economic growth will exceed 1/3 in 2021. State Administration for Market Regulation is the comprehensive market supervision department in China. It plays key roles in improving consumption environment and protecting consumers' rights in order to boost consumer confidence and sustain consumption fundamental role in economic growth. We actively take various initiatives to enhance consumption capacity, improve consumption policies, and develop consumption growth points. Next step, we will continue to work on the following priority measures in area of consumption protection. First, improving the overall safety level of supply chain to improve consumer safety. Second, strengthening government intervention to enhance consumer right to know. Third, optimizing alternative dispute resolution and remedy mechanism to improve consumption remedy experience. Fourth, strengthening law enforcement to ensure consumer policy implementation. And last, innovating consumer protection policy to promote achievement of sustainable development goals. At present, China is being at construction of a new development pattern. Therefore, the market potential will be fully stimulated, and opening up to the world will continue to deepen. In the future, we hope to further strengthen exchange and cooperation with other countries in the field of consumption protection, promote improvement of fairer and more equitable global economic governance system, actively build an open world economy, and jointly serve the interests of consumers around the world. Last but not least, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks to our host, OECD, for their thoughtful preparation for the conference. I wish the conference a complete success. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed to Mr. Yunsong Wang. So that really now sets us up wonderfully for the discussion that's going to follow. I want to introduce our panelists, Maria Carolina Corcione, who is the head of the Consumer Protection National Authority of Colombia. She also led Colombia's recent accession process to the Consumer Policy Committee of the OECD. So hello to you. Alessandro Liotta, from Google. Senior Product Counsel with Google's Consumer Electronics Legal Team, where he specializes in international technical product regulation. Hello. Yvonne Stein is in Stockholm, Senior Civil Servant at the Government Offices of Sweden with over 25 years of experience in consumer protection policy and enforcement. Delphine Dauba-Pantanacce is from eBay, Director and Legal Counsel of Global Regulatory, and her team is basically working to keep prohibited items off the eBay site. Federico Dea, he's the legal director of MercadoLibre. He's based in Argentina. It's a top e-commerce platform, of course, in Latin America. And Federico leads the dispute resolution, employment regulatory, and intellectual property teams. And he was formerly with Google. We're also going to have a short intervention from Panica Contino, who is the head of Consumer Product Safety Unit at the European Commission in Brussels here. Panica is going to talk about a new European proposal on AI. And finally, our expert moderator, Neville Matthew, is the General Manager in the Consumer Product Safety area of the Australian Competition and Consumer Commission, the ACCC. huge background in regulation. I know Neville and the chair of the OECD's Working Party for Consumer Product Safety. So I'm going to leave it in your safe hands, and we will get together in the Q&A at the end.
Many thanks for those kind introductions for me and to our really esteemed panel. So welcome everyone. As touched on by Chairman Adler in his presentation, the consumer marketplace today and into the future presents a range of potential benefits to product safety, but at the same time brings some new risks, some of which we don't really understand fully. This session lets us build on those comments and product safety issues that were raised in discussions yesterday. The panel will look at those potential benefits, the risks to safety brought by new technologies and business models, including online marketplaces, where, as the keynotes have mentioned, many consumers are now purchasing products. Our discussion will look at whether consumer product safety frameworks are robust enough to address the new challenges that consumer product safety authorities are grappling with. And we'll also look at how international cooperation may play an even greater role in developing consumer product safety policy at the global level, as part of the global goal of ensuring that no consumers are left exposed to unsafe products. The OECD's Committee on Consumer Policy, through its Working Party on Consumer Product Safety, has been committed to developing better consumer product safety policies internationally since the 1970s. As mentioned in our opening keynote today, the OECD Council adopted the OECD recommendation on consumer product safety, which in 2020, which consolidated a number of older instruments and modernised them for the digital age. That notion that Chairman Adler mentioned about laws being out of date is very key. So the recommendation outlines the principles that should be at the heart of product safety legal and policy frameworks that are fit for the digital age. The recommendation has been adhered to by all 37 OECD member countries and Brazil. I expect we'll see some further revisions to product safety regulation around the world as countries work to implement the various provisions. Importantly, the recommendation is technology neutral. So we hope it will future-proof for the product safety challenges we've already discussed and those we're yet to see emerge fully. As Chairman Adler touched on, with so many consumers purchasing from online marketplaces, then they do offer a variety of benefits, and which was touched on in yesterday's sessions on marketplaces, but also the availability of unsafe products from third-party sellers can present risks. Greater cooperation between marketplaces and authorities may alleviate some of those risks. And today, the OECD's Working Party on Consumer Product Safety is really very pleased to release a communique encouraging the further cooperation between consumer product safety authorities and online marketplaces around the world through the development of product safety pledges at the national domestic level. We encourage international consistency, and this document that's been released today identifies the key commitments that should be part of effective pledges. So with that, let's turn to our first topic for discussion, which is the benefit and risks to consumer product safety that are being brought about by the digital transformation. IoT and AI and other new technologies like blockchain present a range of potential benefits for product safety. In the case of recalls for connected products, we've already seen cases where manufacturers have been sending recall notices direct to consumers' devices, even powering down devices in some cases to prevent safety incidents. Firstly, perhaps I could turn to Alessandro, and could you please tell us how Google is using new technologies such as those to enhance the safety of its products, or how it plans to do so in the future? Thank you.
Hi, Neville, thank you, and thanks a lot. I'm really honored to be part of this panel today. Yes, so first of all, I would like to set up kind of a context. As a safety professional, I'm a little disappointed to admit that I don't think that Google is using AI in the to solve product safety risks at the moment. As a lawyer, so if I put my lawyer's hat on, I'm a little bit less concerned about that because I mean there's still a lot that we don't know about AI and throwing this new technology into the safety space or it might be a little risky. And what I mean by this is that I don't think that at the moment we use any kind of autonomous system that will make, that is the decision maker whenever there is a potential safety risk. What we do though is, and hopefully more and more effectively, is using a combination of new technologies that allows our safety engineers to make more informed and better decisions over time. So I think we use a combination of sensors in the device in devices that kind of feed some signals from the field, from how the user is using devices, mixed with some sort of algorithms and models that will interpret those signals and perhaps throw some alarms to our safety engineers. And most importantly, I think we are more and more using data that really gives us an understanding of what's going on in the field, what's going on, what has gone wrong in the individual device, if there is an incident specifically that relates to a specific device. Even more importantly to me is the way we're using the datasets that are made available publicly. So the OECD, and I was surprised to also hear that in the ASEAN region there are new datasets that are being created. To me, those for manufacturers are extremely important, because it's not just a matter of being informed about the individual device that is recalled and that cannot be sold anymore, or that consumers should not buy anymore. But for manufacturers especially, it's a way to understand what's happening in the field, how connected devices, especially in the IoT space, are actually being used by users, sometimes spotting these early signs of new unexpected ways that consumers are utilizing their devices in is extremely helpful for us to react promptly to possible problems, but also feeding and informing our future product design to make them more safe in the future. So I would say, no, I don't think that we're still in the pure AI space. I hope one day we will, but I don't think we are there yet. But yes, definitely internally, we're having those discussions now.
Thank you. So very much stay tuned for us to hear what comes next. But that idea of early warning is really important about what's happening in the market. So it would be interesting to hear our online marketplace businesses might be using new technologies to enhance consumer product safety. So can I call upon Delphine and Federico to share any examples of how eBay and MercadoLibre are using, for example, AI, blockchain, or other new technologies for better safety? Thanks.
So shall I start?
Yes, please, Delphine.
Thank you. So thank you very much for inviting eBay to that conference. Yeah, so regarding AI, I think this is indeed an interesting technology that would need to be considered, but we would consider that technology as a complementary tool to the current ones that we are already using. So for instance, at eBay, we are using some algorithm-based rules. We are also using human resources and also obviously cooperation. So I think AI is probably, I would say that it's a bit premature to consider AI as, I would say, a technology, like a standard technology that would address any type of product safety issues. I think, as it has been said previously, this technology again should be considered as a combination of the tool that we are already using. I think at the same time, we don't know whether this technology will be really efficient, like the unique solution to product safety related matters. On top of the tool that I just mentioned that eBay has been using to address product safety matters, eBay has also recently built and launched a regulatory portal that basically gives participating regulatory authorities around the world the jurisdiction to report and take down listings automatically. And this portal is probably another example of tool of technology that can be, created, considered to further, address product safety challenges. As I was saying, it's a global tool that is being offered to regulatory authorities. And as we all know, product safety is a global topic. And I think this tool is a way, to address the challenges when it comes to, differences in terms of jurisdiction or regulatory landscapes. So just to summarize, AI, an interesting technology, but that needs to be considered within, the various tools that we have in place, like I would say a Swift knife, and making sure that we can use, those different tools to all together fight against product safety and tackle product safety matters and product consumer at the end of the day. And maybe also just to end my intervention on this, because it's a global matter. We at eBay, our team is set up at a global level as well, which enable regulatory authorities to directly contact one single point of contact in case they have to report unsafe products, and this definitely enable us to have a very quick decision-making process, and also to directly and quickly set up global measures immediately, and not just to have measures in one region. Instead, the idea is really to have a global approach immediately. Thank you.
Thank you, Delphine. And that notion of global topic and global responses, I think, is important. But can I call upon Federico to ask about technology on the MercadoLibre platform and how you're using it? Federico, you have the floor.
Thank you so much for inviting us to be part of this incredible discussion. We are on the same page as eBay. For the moment, at least, it's hard to think about AI as an isolated solution. It's, as Delphine mentioned, a complementary tool with others that we are using. Although we are using AI to scale many processes, it is clear that we are in its early days, right? AI is so powerful that there is a long way to go and understand how to use it effectively. But let me just name a few areas in which AI is already present at MercadoLibre: scaling takedowns, enforcement of product policies, improving our KYC processes, and on crime and fraud prevention. To have a better understanding on how AI can contribute, I will use the example of recalls. When we have a recall, we use AI and algorithmic solutions to the extent of our possibilities to identify listings corresponding to that product and remove those listings from all our sites in one single process. In addition to that, with the testing data, we nourish our machine learning systems with expressions regarding the recalled product model to improve the system efficiency. Our stats reflect that more than 99% of the removed listings are detected by our systems. Less than 1% of the listings removed from the platform correspond to irregular content individualized by the authorities, the users, or stakeholders with which we have collaboration agreements. This automated process is not exempt of risks and challenges, right? From the legal and from the technical standpoint. And I think that that has to be part of the agenda if we aim to shift to a smart regulation model. Another example is on the user side. AI is contributing enormously to improve our KYC processes, to minimize the existence of fraudulent profiles and to find suspected users. Reducing the risk of fraud is another way to protect our users, contributing to the success of the whole e-commerce experience. Yesterday, I heard many times the word trust, as an intrinsic value of the e-commerce. I fully agree with that. The whole experience and the retention of the users depend on trust. And I am sure that AI can make a great contribution to improve user trust.
Thank you, Federico, for those illustrations, how you're using things, and that notion of trust, I think, is really, really important for growing e-commerce to its full potential. Just sort of changing gears a little bit, I mean, one of the challenges that have been identified with IoT connected products is that they can enter the market as safe and then potentially become unsafe, perhaps from a software update that fails or makes the product function in an unanticipated way, or even by hacking by a malicious third party. This is being called hazardization. Turning to Yvonne, I was hoping that you might be able to share your view on why this might be a real challenge for consumer product safety authorities. Yvonne, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Nelly.
Merci.
To make it very short, I could just use 2 words and then stop, but I won't do that. Increased complexity. The concept of products are getting more and more complex due to connected devices and embedded software. When a consumer buys a product, it does not just buy a product. It gets into a relationship with an economic operator for the whole lifetime of a product. So connected devices are also in product getting smaller and smaller, and they're getting cheaper and cheaper. And economic operators, in order to hot up their ordinary products, they are very keen to put those devices in ordinary products. And consumers like them. They like them a lot, so they are very sellable. But it takes knowledge and it costs to ensure that these connected products are safe all through a lifetime. And in many cases, the economic operators had neither knowledge nor a real economic interest to correct flaws, such as the device maybe being hackable. So the concept of safety is getting more complex. And it's not always evidence the distinguish between safety and security. Of course, legislation comes always after problems occurring. So also legislation and application legislation is getting more complex. Different pieces of legislation interact and must be applied in the same cases. So on this digital global market, more and more connected products. There is a calculation that by 2023, there will be 36 billion connected devices going on the walls. They not only appear on the market, they disappear on the market, and they reappear on the market, and they change during their lifetime. Due to that, we have new economic operators. They also appear, disappear, and reappear on the market. So this, of course, puts demand on product safety authorities and enforcers to act swiftly, agile, and to cooperate more, to be more on their toes. So as a consequence, and we finish with the same words I started with, you might say market surveillance are getting more complex. Thank you.
Thank you for those thoughts, Yvonne. That's really very useful for a frame for us to think about this. And I might extend into, online shopping, and we've heard from Keynotes about digital transformation and how it's increased, and there's been new business models, and particularly online marketplaces and how they're emerging. Maria Carolina, I was hoping that you might join the discussion and outline for us the key consumer product safety risks that are arising online. Thanks.
Good morning, good evening to you, Neville, and to the rest of the panelists. And I would like to thank the OECD for this opportunity to participate in the international conference. Well, as an enforcement authority from an emerging economy where e-commerce has been rapidly growing, we have identified 3 main consumer product safety risks that are arising online. The first risk I would like to talk about is related to information. When buying online, consumers have access to all sorts of products. In addition, contact portals, marketplaces, e-commerce businesses can sell products manufactured worldwide, and consumers can also have access to businesses located overseas. Consumers, often driven just by attractive or convenient prices of products sold online, don't review the information of the product, and furthermore, they have not developed the skills to search about safety characteristics or alerts. Reviewing and researching can be time-consuming for online transactions. Besides, cross-border transactions can involve different languages that consumers cannot be able to understand. Our second risk emerges from cross-border transactions implicit in e-commerce. Imagine that many Colombian consumers buy a product from an e-commerce business based in country A. When a product safety issue arises in Colombia, the Colombian authority may not have enough information to contact the business in country A. And even more problematic is the fact that the Colombian authority does not have any enforcement powers overseas to investigate and adopt measures. In addition, the authority doesn't have the capability of enforcing its product safety legal framework outside its jurisdiction. E-commerce and cross-border transactions can also enable business to identify countries where product safety regulation is weak or non-existent to introduce products known or identified as unsafe in other jurisdictions. Another risk that we have identified is related to new e-commerce business models where intermediaries are the ones selling products to consumers, but as intermediaries, some of them claim that consumers must contact suppliers or manufacturers in case they have any problem, including product safety issues. How come? That's a problem we have identified. Joint liability of the manufacturing and distribution chain is a requirement in any product safety field. So those are the three risks we have identified now.
Well, thank you very much for identifying those risks, and it is pointing us towards topic 2, which is really starting the discussion about product safety frameworks. So let's move into topic 2 now, and how can we ensure that consumer product safety frameworks are robust enough to address all of the challenges that have been identified. We have started to see a number of countries around the world reassessing their product safety legal and policy frameworks to cover some of the sorts of situations that have been described in that bid to make sure that they're still fit for purpose in the face of all this change and quite rapid change. So if I could call upon Panellists, Head of the Unit for Product Safety from the European Commission, I was hoping you could assist the panel by telling us a little about recent developments in the European Union in regards to product safety, the safety of products that incorporate artificial intelligence. The floor is yours.
Many thanks, Neville. Absolutely. I will tell you in a couple of words why AI can cause safety concerns. I will give you a high-level idea of what the Commission's proposal on artificial intelligence is, and I will try to explain the complementarity between the artificial intelligence legislative framework and other EU frameworks, in particular the one for product safety. So on the first point, actually, artificial intelligence can present safety concerns, in particular because of its interrelation with other technologies. For example, AI-powered and connected products can pose new safety risks for consumers. Let's think about connected products which can be subject to cybersecurity threats. Moreover, we have some evidence that new technologies can be a source of personal security risks, as well as mental health risks, because they might cause addiction, lack of sleep, or even depression. And this, of course, is something not completely new, but definitely that is presenting new aspects for product safety. So we would really like to invite producers and developers of these technologies to take into account these increased risks when designing their products, so they are safe by design. AI and software more generally are also challenging the concept of placing on the market, something that also other speakers have spoken about. So I will not indulge on this point, and I will pass to the presentation of the Commission's Artificial Intelligence Package of 21st April this year, which aims to turn Europe into the global hub for trustworthy artificial intelligence. And it does so through two aspects: developing AI while addressing the problems it may cause. The combination of this first ever legal framework on AI and a new coordinated plan with member states aims to guarantee the safety and fundamental rights of people and businesses, while at the same time strengthening AI uptake, investment and innovation across the EU. We want the new AI regulation to make sure that Europeans can trust what AI has to offer. And we have heard that there is a lot to offer. So it comprises proportionate and flexible rules to address the specific risks posed by AI systems in certain contexts and setting very high standards. It provides for a technology-neutral definition of AI systems that is future-proof, so that it can cover techniques and approaches which are not yet known or developed. It bans a few particularly risky applications, such as social scoring by governments, exploitation of vulnerability of children, for example, in toys which use voice assistants that encourages dangerous behavior or use of subliminal techniques. And for the rest, it is risk-based. It focuses on so-called high-risk AI use cases, so that this way, whatever is not high risk can really flourish. Due to these features, it is important to provide the horizontal framework that establishes requirements on AI. And it works in complementarity with other sectoral legislation. As far as product safety is concerned, in the EU, actually the AI legislative framework works as a lex specialis, which means that it intervenes whenever the rest of the legislation covering product safety doesn't have this kind of requirement as set out in the AI legislation. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Venetia, for describing that horizontal fail-safe system that is being put in place. That's fascinating. If I can just ask the panelists to keep the rest of their responses for this session brief, just trying to catch up a little bit of time. So about a minute, a bit over a minute each for the next responses, please. So staying in the EU, I'd like to invite Yvonne to describe what does this mean in practice for an EU country such as Sweden? Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Neville. So the trend we heard is away from directives and it's toward harmonization at EU level. And those proposals going on at the same time, general product safety, market surveillance regulation, new one, Postal and Digital Services Act, and on AI, they all have something in common. They're all horizontal and they all interact with each other on the legal system. So as a result, as a negotiator, you must be familiar with a proposal you yourself negotiate, but you must also be familiar with all the other relevant proposals going on during all the negotiations in order to ensure coherence and avoid regulatory gaps. Of course, the Commission starts this proposal, they do that, but during proposals or negotiation going on with 1-2 years, things change. So this is responsibility. It's also when we have this legislation in place, it's work in a complex context. So it's if you have a doll today, you have a doll is a toy. It might be a problem with a toy, might have some electricity, you have a VAT authority, might be chemicals, you have VAT authority. And add the AI, you have a fourth authority for a toy. So the demand on cooperation between authorities and enforcers will increase. And that's natural, but it has been taken into account. So what does that mean? That means that the use of IoT and AI experts and behavioral experts will be needed, but it won't be enough with those. Those experts must be able to understand and communicate with lawyers, economists, and other technologies. And there will be an increased demand for bridges between specialists, generalists, and between different authorities. So this will be a real challenge when it comes to administrative capacity, I would say.
Thank you for those thoughts. That complexity and the challenge is quite daunting. So changing themes a little bit, I mean, under many existing product safety laws, IoT products can involve a blurring of lines between traditional definitions of goods and the hardware and services and, say, the software. And there is the issue of convergence between product safety, digital security and privacy in the IoT. Do these kinds of products mean in the future we should be framing product safety policies to not only cover the safety of products, but the safety of consumers more broadly? And I'd like to invite Alessandro to give us some thoughts briefly. Thanks.
Thank you. To me, this discussion around convergence of regulations is fascinating. I've had with some of you, I've had other discussions separately. It's always been super interesting to understand points of views on this particular topic. Definitely, digital security versus including personal security versus product safety versus the safety of consumers versus mental harm and physical harm, addictions, and the protection of children. I think all these interests, all these public interests are definitely in need of a strong protection. To me, the question that I have every time that I think about this is whether the safety framework is the right regulatory tool and instrument to address these issues and protect those public interests. And I know that we're already in a sense we've already blurred those lines, especially between security and safety. We've had that case in Europe last year or a couple of years ago, where a children wearable device was recalled on safety grounds for a security flaw. And again, in that case, to me, I don't know much about the specifics of the case or the product, but definitely there is no doubt in my mind from what I read that that product had to be removed from the market. But I don't know if the safety escalation path was the right one to tackle it. And I just wanted to make an imaginary example that I think would come out from those same principles and approach. Say that we have a smart lock in our house, and a burglar hacks the smart lock, enters the house and harms the household. If we follow this approach, in this case, the smart lock might actually be recalled on safety grounds if we feel that there were some security flaws and clearly there was personal harm. If instead the same burglar broke into a house with a standard lock and chain and just smashed into the door and caused exactly the same harm, we would not likely recall the smart lock on safety grounds. Those are the things that I think we need to clarify as we go through this journey of blurring the lines, as you all were talking about. Where do we put the new borderline, and how can we identify those types of products and types of use cases where this new approach will be useful and where instead it's not going to be as useful. And so this debate is extremely interesting for me.
Thank you. And which jurisdiction they might fall will probably vary across countries. But speaking of cross countries, I just wondered if Maria Carolina might like to give a quick reflection on this topic from a Colombian perspective. Thank you.
Sure, Neville, thank you. I have mixed feelings about this question. Authorities, we often talk about comprehensive consumer protection, and of course it would be ideal to have broad product safety policies that cover safety issues, privacy issues, security issues. It would be ideal to grant consumers comprehensive protection from unsafe products that may harm other rights. Nevertheless, from the perspective of the authority from a developing country like Colombia, we are still implementing our product safety regulation after 10 years. We are still managing to gather accident data to make efficient decisions. We are still trying to sort what to do with the lack of laboratories to perform safety tests. In addition, having broad product safety policies can pose another problem when enforcement powers have been assigned to different authorities with different technical skills. Interagency or inter-authority collaboration can be very challenging. We can't deny that IoT and AI are a global reality, and both topics are merging with product safety. So when the time comes, we will unquestionably rely on cooperation and capacity building from more developed jurisdictions that are already working on broader policies. Neville.
Thank you. Just a reminder to my panelists that we are running, about 4 or 5 minutes behind, and I do want to try and make sure everyone gets to make a contribution. So if I could ask you to really hone in and keep your presentations as brief as we can. The next topic I was going to invite Yvonne to speak on in terms of the pandemic and how it's changed approaches to product safety regulation in Sweden, if that's happened in any way with products such as medical in nature, such as face masks. Yvonne?
Thank you, Neville. I'll try to be brief. During the pandemic, of course, like in all countries, there was an increased demand for COVID-related products. And in Sweden, we have special attention given to personal equipment and medical devices. And also in Sweden, we don't use that many face masks, but still there was an increased demand for face masks, and all kinds of masks appear on the market. So what to do with masks not being dangerous, but not fulfill either requirement as medical devices or personal protective equipment? The solution was to give a Swedish Work Environment Authority to ensure a procedure that these dangerous masks fulfill certain criteria in order to be sold on the market. If I did that, okay on the market. If I did not, I shouldn't appear. During this pandemic, it was also clear that the need for information from trustworthy sources has improved. And market surveillance authorities were considered to be trustworthy sources. And their demand for information was also from consumers, it was from economic operators, from other authorities, both nationally and internationally. So you might say as a conclusion that the importance of a robust product safety regulation in the bottom, trustworthy information, efficient market surveillance, but a great amount of cooperation and flexibility was needed during this crisis. Thank you.
Thank you. And we've seen a number of instances of face masks and other PPE being recalled as they didn't comply with relevant safety standards, but still reportedly being available on online marketplaces. And I'd really like to understand very brief answers, if I could, from the panelists on this, how consumer product safety authorities and marketplaces have been working together to address this challenge. Just high-level points, thanks. Maria Carolina first.
Thank you, Neville. Well, the Superintendence of Industry and Commerce, as the Consumer Protection Authority, can order marketplaces based in Colombia to recall products that don't comply with safety standards, including those that use misleading information that can lead to a safety problem. If the marketplace does not comply, the authority can impose high penalties. Nevertheless, I am convinced that product safety issues are managed successfully when preventive measures are implemented voluntarily. In Colombia, the SIC, working together with the main e-commerce businesses and contact portals, managed to take down more than 1,200 offers of COVID-related articles that didn't comply with relevant safety standards. In addition, and I'm very glad to share this panel with Federico de Ya from MercadoLibre, the SIC is going to sign an MOU with this company seeking to share information regarding unsafe products and ongoing recalls, and to identify in real time unsafe products. The same exercise, signing MOUs, is being done with other e-commerce business based in Colombia now.
Thank you. And that sounds like an entree for Federico to respond, perhaps, from his perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, in my view, 2020 has been a year where self-regulations and creative cooperation and interactions with regulators have covered in many cases the lack of regulation or gray areas, putting the user interest first more than ever. There is no doubt that the exceptionality of the pandemic demanded exceptional measures and efforts from everyone, and a lot of dialogue with the authorities. Many years ago, we decided to cover this lack of regulations or existing gap via collaboration agreements with different authorities. This is a corporate standard at the MercadoLibre that we pretend to continue exploring all along our region. Our agreements cover the most varied areas, from wildlife conservation species to pharma and hate speech. But as you can imagine, during the last year, our focus was on the sanitary side to make sure that we were following regulators' criteria in our marketplace policies of products. Bear in mind that face masks, sanitizers, filters, oxygen tubes, and all sorts of products against COVID were all highly demanded and under a very strong scrutiny from the authorities. Our recent transparency report reflects that only in the second half of 2020, we removed more than 60,000 listings of this type of COVID-related products, primarily due to policy breaches and deceptive advertising. And the example of the agreement that Maria Carolina just mentioned is one piece of what we are aiming to do. We have a similar agreement in Peru within the copy and also with sanitary authorities in Argentina, Chile, Colombia, Brazil, and Mexico, for instance. We believe that these agreements are a triple win as they are beneficial for the authority, for the marketplace, and for the consumers, allowing us to maintain our site clean of illegal or irregular products. We really look forward to engaging with different authorities all along the region to explore similar possibilities as we did with the SIC in Colombia.
Thank you. And just the final word on this to Delphine, is there anything, a few words that you could say about any different views or experiences from eBay?
Sure thing. Thank you, Neville. Yes, actually, the COVID-19 has definitely increased the shift to the digital age. And I think what happened back then was that the cooperation with the authority on that topic was really key for us, so that we can get, information very early to take appropriate measures when it comes to COVID-19 related products. I have, for instance, two examples in mind. We have a close cooperation with the UK authorities, and especially with our primary authority, Westminster Trading Standards. And they do inform us very early that the UK HAC was facing challenges when it comes to KN95 masks. As you know, those masks are, coming from China, and those are equivalent to the FFP2, the European standards. And it seemed that the UK authorities consider that they were facing issues with the level of compliance of KN95 mask because they could not be considered as a PPE, like a protective personal equipment. So based on that shared information, based on that intelligence that we received very early, eBay has decided to completely ban KN95 mask on the site. At the same time, we put different measures to ensure that our consumers could find essential products during the pandemic. Another quick example that we received from the authorities was in relation to a miracle medicine that was starting to popping up on the internet, and called Arbidol. And thanks to that, cooperation, we could immediately block any potential listing that would offer that miracle medicine, which is actually not authorized on the EU market, but obviously that was a global approach, as I was saying. So yes, I think again, the cooperation with authorities is crucial. And I think COVID-19 has illustrated the importance of that cooperation globally.
Thank you. And our third topic is the role of international cooperation. So that's a good entree. Look, I will ask the panelists to keep their responses to 1 minute for each of these, so that we can allow some time for questions. And I'll be very short in my introductory remarks, because we have already noted the importance of cooperation. We've discussed the recommendation. The ASEAN's Deputy Secretary General, highlighted the OECD global recalls, how it is linked to ASEAN. It also integrates the EU SafetyGate portal, and this makes it a really strong and truly international tool to inform and alert authorities, businesses, and consumers. So jumping straight in for some short responses. Firstly, Yvonne and Maria Carolina, in what further areas do you think international forums like the OECD could assist countries to enhance consumer product safety? Yvonne first, please.
Thank you, Neville. I mean, we are in two transitions. We are in digital transition, increased use of IoT and AI, and we are in green transition with demand for circular economy and sustainable development. And both of these transitions have an impact on product safety and sometimes vice versa. And I think OECD has an important role to play in both these transitions, not only as a source of facts and analysis and to promote cooperation between its members and associates, but to really be a front runner and to play an important role in cooperation with other international organizations. And I think it's important to remember that we are only the beginning of a time of quick development. And global problems and global solutions takes international cooperation to succeed. And I think that OECD really have an important role to play. Thank you.
Thank you. And Maria Carolina, 1 minute, please.
Well, thank you, Neville. Well, international forums like the OECD are extremely important to countries that are recently working on product safety. Learning from other countries' best practices and experiences and following the recommendations can accelerate product safety development in any jurisdiction. Colombia has been participating in the CCP and its product safety working group for more than 5 years now. And we've been involved in this work, and this has allowed us to learn and improve the way we're doing things. We have participated in the global awareness campaigns organized by the working group, being able to contribute with the design and the translation into Spanish of key messages, while mentioning the language is always a barrier. In addition, I would like to recognize that forums like the OECD strengthen cooperation relationships between countries. Countries that participate in the discussions and drafting of OECD instruments in the product safety field often meet in other international organizations and can give continuity to the work done. For example, Australia, Colombia, the European Commission, the United States, and other countries that are members and observers of the CCP Working Group on Consumer Product Safety work together to produce the UNCTAD recommendation on preventing cross-border distribution to known unsafe consumer products, which is an instrument extremely important for countries and markets of the Latin American region. Thank you, Neville.
Thank you very much. And it'd be good to get a business perspective. And so I'll be calling on Alessandro, Delphine, and Federico in that order. 1 minute each, please, on why it is important that businesses are part of the policy discussion when it comes to product safety, and any ideas how the OECD could further strengthen dialogue with businesses. Alessandro first.
Yeah, hi, thanks. To me, it is definitely critical to have an open discussion, continue having, I would say, an open discussion between industry and regulators. I think in the safety area, we're kind of fortunate to be aligned at a deep level with regulators, I would say, because I don't think that there is any reputable business that would intentionally want to manufacture or sell unsafe products, and I think the interests are really aligned. To me, I wanted to focus on just 3 hot topics that I think where it would be great to enhance that open discussion. One is the use of data. I think I discussed earlier how important it is to find a better way to share data of what happens in the field. I think there are great data sets, but the sharing of information within industry and with regulators sometimes is a little hard. The second is, as we go through this wave of very important regulation, let's not forget innovation and let's not add obstacles to innovation. The third point is, I'm seeing as this convergence of regulations go ahead, that some areas are not really hearing too much the voice of safety interest. I'm thinking about, for example, interoperability or repairability, or the extended life of products for sustainability purposes. In all these huge topics of regulations are extremely important, I don't see how the safety voice is being heard. So I think a little bit more interaction there would be, in my view, very, very useful. Thank you.
Thank you. Delphine?
Yeah, thank you, Neville. Yeah, so in terms of cooperation, I think it's, as I already mentioned, key for everyone to cooperate at a global level. And I think what is really important is to have every, a stakeholder around the table, making sure that everyone, can share his input when it comes to product safety matters. And I'm thinking precisely about, obviously, authorities, businesses, consumers, but I would add precisely consumers association, because I think they do have some expertise in that area that would be, very useful to help tackling product safety matters. And I think the OECD role is very important in that area as well. And I think the OECD recommendation on consumer product safety is a very good illustration of how we can approach that cooperation at a global level. And I think we would also need to ensure that there's some kind of consistency at an international level when it comes to product safety pledges. eBay has signed the EU product safety pledge as well as the Australian product safety pledge. Those two pledges are the same basically, and I think it would be very beneficial for everyone to ensure that we have the same approach at a global level, and we are welcoming very much this communique from the OECD to ensure consistency in that area. Thank you.
And thank you. The final word goes to Federico. 1 minute if you could. Thanks.
Thanks, Neville. Very short from my side. I'm in line with Delphine and Alessandro. Smart regulations demand complex discussions with the contribution of the academia, the experts, consumer associations, tech companies, the industry. Open processes are more than welcome for the benefit of everyone. It is very important for all players to be able to sit at the table in order to design cooperation channels and articulate solutions, understanding what could and could not be done by each of these players. And as I said before, in our experience, the dialogue with regulators in Latin America has been far more productive than just interpreting legal regimes when existing and trying to comply. And in that smart and constructive interaction, the consumer wins. So my suggestion is that as OECD is a very strong and influential organization, it can definitively help highlighting the importance of these alliances between the public and the private sector. Dialogue means understanding, and that's an essential element to tackle legal challenges and some incipient regulations, as it is the case of Latin America, in order to have a real digital transformation. Thank you, Neville.
Thank you very much for those comments, and that idea of from all of our industry participants, that idea of working together to face common problems to deliver good outcomes for consumers is really very valuable. Now, if my reckoning is correct, Kathy, we have about 5 minutes to take some questions from our online audience. And are you able to assist and tell us what we've got coming through the conference platform, and particularly if they're addressed to any particular panelist? Otherwise, you and I might need to decide who answers them. Thanks.
Well, there's one very specific one about the role for ISO standards for the development of AI and the product safety framework, so that all countries are using the same standards when it comes to AI. So maybe Panuccia has some thoughts on that. So is there a role for ISO standards for the development of AI and the product safety framework so that all countries are using the same standards?
Thank you very much. Of course, standards are always a very, very important part of any product safety legislation. I think I can safely say around the world. Of course, when it comes to having the same standards, the situation is a bit different because we have European standardization bodies, we have international standardization bodies. We all believe that we can and we will cooperate more so that maybe one day we'll get to the dream situation where the same standards apply everywhere. But we know that this is complicated, so I'm sure we will all continue working together for this. And in any case, international cooperation is key also for standards.
Okay, thank you very much, Panita. And there's a quite an interesting question here, which is about hazardization of IoT products. So it says that while it seems that hazardization caused by problematic software update is a product issue, the suggestion from the panelists about hacking by a malicious third party sounds it's more like a criminal justice issue. So do the regulators have a view about whether the actions of malicious third parties should be dealt with as a product issue or a criminal justice issue? So when it comes to hazardization, it's complex, but it's an interesting one. Who should we give this one to? Neville.
Look, I think if we invite Yvonne first, and then we might check in with some of the other regulators, but then perhaps go to industry, because I think it was one of our industry participants who raised the idea of different justice regimes may need to apply. But Yvonne first, if I could.
Thank you. I think our criminal issues should be dealt with by a criminal law. I mean, if you hack something, you're doing something criminal. That doesn't mean that if you have a device that you have no control over, perhaps that device shouldn't be used, or it should be corrected so it's more difficult to hack. So probably in those cases, I mean, criminal is criminal, but to improve the products has to go on in parallel. And always you have possibility for consumers to claim liability in spite of being a criminal offense. So again, we are going into complexity. I don't think we shift from criminal activities to making them civil activities or market activities. No, I don't think that. But I think there'll be several routes to get the things into order.
Thank you. And María Carolina, as one of the other regulators on the panel, did you have a view on this one?
Well, no, I think, and Kathy, I think that both regimes are not, they do not exclude each other. They seek different things, so you can pursue different objectives with product safety regime and criminal justice. So I think they can both be applied in standardization problems.
Okay, thank you very much, Dick. Just very quickly, one last question. This is from Andrew Hadley, the UK CMA, who we met yesterday. How can authorities ensure product safety in relation to used goods, for example, through platforms enabling C2C transactions? So how can authorities ensure product safety in relation to used goods, particularly in consumer-to-consumer transactions? Where are we putting that one?
Well, I think if it's addressed to regulators, we might ask Yvonne first again, and María Carolina.
We've got to be quite quick on this because we're coming towards an end. Just a very brief response.
Yeah, very brief. I mean, if you have an economic operator using an expert adding a software device to a product, of course, he's responsible for what he's doing. If other economic operator sells it, he's responsible as well. So, I mean, there's always someone you can neck down on responsibility. The question is who.
Thank you. Do we need to, are we putting this to someone else now?
I think if we could just to hear from María Carolina, and then I think we're out of time, and if you could take us to the break after that. So María Carolina, last word for the panel.
Well, I think there's a good answer in the recommendation, the OECD recommendation on product safety that takes into account the whole life cycle of the product, including used goods. So regulators must look at the recommendation to build their product safety framework, taking into account the whole life cycle of the product.
Thank you. Over to you, Kathy.
Well, thank you very much indeed for all your thoughts and wonderful chairing from Neville. Let's just do a quick sum up and let's look at Josh's wonderful artwork, which we've seen flashes of during the session, but we haven't seen it in its entirety. What I was seeing in Josh's work, which was the word that has come out of this session, complexity. It is. I'm not seeing Josh's work at the moment, so maybe we can get it up on the screen in a larger version. But I mean, the Rubik's Cube in itself suggests the complexity. There we are, I can see it now. And this idea of complexity, and then of course, cooperation, really, really important. We've certainly been seeing how market surveillance is much more complex. We've heard that during the conversation, the need for cooperation and flexibility. And also, of course, new expertise needed in consumer product safety authorities to address things like AI and new tech laws. In the meantime, of course, policy frameworks are changing a lot. We're hearing from the EU the ambition to be a global hub for trustworthy AI. We know that at OECD level, global recalls portal, a recommendation on consumer product safety, a lot happening out there in the policy world. But it's sort of playing catch sometimes because, you know, we're seeing these blurring of lines that we've heard about, the traditional definition of goods and services, really tough. And our speaker from Google said that there should be separate concepts, digital security and product safety. So it is complex. So the COVID has shown us the importance of global cooperation, and everyone agreed that the OECD has got an important role to play. But this discussion needs to involve everybody. It needs to be businesses, it needs to be consumer organizations, to really, really get everybody around the table and not get in spheres somewhere that could get in the way of innovation, but obviously safety has to be there and not forgotten about in all sorts of the pieces of legislation. So that sort of sums up the sort of things. I mean, when we were talking about hazardization, you know, one big statistic that came out, 36 billion connected devices in the world that are changing all the time, coming and going. You know, it is complex. And Yvonne, you brought that home very, very, and here's the second of Josh's slides, the changing consumer product safety landscape. We've seen increasing and necessary growth in international cooperation. And we've got a quote from Nelson Mandela, which is great. So you will get a chance to look in more detail at these wonderful illustrations. There's so much, and they're so rich, and there's so much to take in, but they will be on the event website for you to have a look at. So we're going to take a break now. I'd like to thank again our speakers and for Neville for leading us through so well. We're going to come back at 2:10 CET, where we're going to talk about consumers in the green economy. So I hope you can join us then.